Milford, and not all politicians are tarred with the same brush. And I'm about to speak to Craig Mackinlay, who's MP and chair of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, and I can very much account for him and his absolute acumen as to what he does, because Craig Mackinlay is a man that we should count as one of our best MPs, actually. Craig, I'm sorry to have to begin the interview by hosing you down with praise, but, you know, we like to make sure that not everybody gets told that they're doing a useless job, because that's not really fair on you guys.
Well, that's a rare event, and thank you, Mike.
Well, it's important, though. It really is, because there is I mean, there is, unfortunately, and to some extent, MPs themselves are to blame for this. There is an unfortunate sort of view abroad that a lot of MPs are kind of not really understanding what ordinary people are going through. They're living their lives quite well cosseted from the cost of living increases. They've got quite a lot of perks and all that kind of thing. But, I mean, I think, particularly in your case and in many of your colleagues' cases, you do important work. You do ask questions of the government. A lot of people are dissatisfied with the government at the moment, but the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, for example, is the only place, really, inside of Westminster where you hear the kind of conversations that we have every day on TalkTV.
No, absolutely right. I mean, I'd started this up 2 years ago because if we are embarked on a process that's going to cost £3 trillion across the country to decarbonise, I think we need to be making those decisions based on proper facts, allowing people to know what the price is going to be and how it's going to affect their lives. And increasingly, people are saying, hold on, is it really going to cost that? Why am I doing this? Yeah, I want a better planet. I want that as well, and I get all that. But then you look overseas with Britain's 1% of global CO2 output, and you see other countries still expanding, China digging up new coal, increasing their output in 1 year. Just the incremental increase is the entire output of the UK. And British people say, well, hold on, yeah, we sort of agree with it, but, you know, let's be sensible here. This has to be a global effort, not a unilateral one by the UK. Putting our high-energy industry out of business, probably moving abroad, so we'll actually import those products back on a diesel-powered ship to the UK, and also the energy security that's gone, or insecurity that's gone round it. So, to me, this is probably the most important discussion that this Parliament can have, so we can have a pathway of common sense. And I'm glad to be on the radio of common sense this morning discussing this with you,
and
Mike.
the television of common sense as well, let's face it. But we've got a lot of questions for you, Craig. I mean, for example, a lot of people asking me, what's going on with the energy bill, for example? We were expecting it to have a vote, I think, last Tuesday. Didn't quite work out. We think it's now gone for more amendments to be read, so it's probably going to be going through another couple of sessions, one would expect. But a lot of people are worried about some of the things in the energy bill. I'm not so sure that these are things which might not get cut out of it in the end, but things like, you know, is it going to happen that people are going to be forced to take a smart meter into their home? Is it going to happen that if they don't have the right requisite amount of, you know, green energy heating their home, that they'll have trouble selling that home? You know, those kinds of questions are what bother people a lot.
Yeah, well, I focus very much on this criminality element. I mean, there's lots wrong with this bill. It's nudged by Whitehall into saying, well, hydrogen's good and these other things are good and smart meters are required and you will do as you're told on this path to net zero. No, on the face of it, this bill does not create criminal offences, but what was so unwelcome and I'm afraid unacceptable in my view, and that's why I focused on it in my speech, as did Jacob Rees-Mogg, was the potential for ministers of the future to create by statutory instrument, and let's be very honest, statutory instruments don't always get the attention and scrutiny they deserve, to create potential criminal offences with imprisonment of up to 12 months. Now, I'm tempted to ask the Justice Minister a question as to, well, how is his future prison building programme going? Because you're going to need an awful lot of places. No, it was the worry about the potential by Just SI to create new criminal offences on the back of this net zero ambition. And that was what I was most concerned about and why I highlighted it very forcibly last week and forced the third reading division. Now, this is a bit of a peculiar bill because it originated in the Lords. So the opportunity now of further amendments is very limited because the Commons has had its say. Government has put down a lot of amendments on the back of the new Secretary of State, Claire Coutinho. The Lords cannot amend that. they have to either accept or reject the amendments that came from the Commons. So this is a bit of a peculiar bill. I'm sorry to say the opportunity for it to be amended at this stage is very limited. The only thing, and I hope the government take this opportunity, is to simply park it in the Lords and let's have a rational debate about what it's trying to intend.
Yes, because one of the stories that's emerged from it as well is that one of the UK's biggest boiler manufacturers has said that because it will have to raise the price of gas boilers, it could end up costing ordinary households somewhere in the order of £2,300 a year to have new equipment fitted to comply with whatever might come out of this energy bill. So, I mean, it's no small beer, this, is it? And it's there's a letter circulated, I don't know if you've seen it, from Worcester Bosch on social media,
yes,
in which it talks about, you know, what might happen. They're still waiting to see what the government's sort of new rules will be. But clearly, whatever it is, it's going to cost more money.
Well, of course, everything to do with net zero costs more money. There's a report over the weekend that it could cost £63 billion over a number of years to strip out the old gas pipes if they have their way. These are all added costs that just keep coming out of the woodwork on this net zero process. Now, I did see that letter yesterday, and I must say, Mike, I wasn't aware that this was currently under consultation. Now, the consultation, meant to start next year, is that the boiler manufacturers will have to sell 4% of the entirety of what they sell being heat pump related. That goes up to 6% the year after, and it has to be 25% of everything they sell by 2028. I mean, I don't know if I'm wrong, but we live in a capitalist society. I go in a shop and I choose what I want to buy. That's how it works.
Right.
And if the manufacturers are selling something at the right price and it does all the things I want it to do, I'll probably buy it. But this is actually an enforcement of the numbers of heat pumps that have to be sold. I mean, the opportunity for mis-selling here, I'm afraid, are obvious, and this is also applying in the electric vehicle market. Similar type of progressive, thou shalt sell certain percentage of cars as EVs. What about the consumer? The consumer should be in the driving seat of this. If they want them, they'll buy them. If they work, they'll buy them. And if the price is right, they'll buy them. Thankfully, this is still under consultation, but, you know, not many months away this is meant to come in. And so these added costs, say Worcester Bosch doesn't manage to encourage its customers to buy heat pumps because they just don't want them. The neighbours have got one, it doesn't work, it's pretty inefficient, it's rubbish. They will have to bear a fine, and they'll have to be finding that fine money out of levying an extra fee on the boilers, i.e. the gas boilers that people want. I mean, this, I'm afraid, is very dangerous ground. It needs to be scrapped. I'm afraid, as does the 2030 ban on traditional internal combustion engine cars and vans as well. Because we've seen with the result in Ruislip, Boris's old seat, that these aren't wanted. They voted against Mayor Khan's charge, his ULEZ, £12.50 a day. And I would have thought, if the government's got any sense, there are very few votes in this net zero ambition once the costs are recognised. Right.
And Kerry Badenoch's come out and said that, you know, she would like to see China heading for net zero. I mean, what I think people would have been more willing to accept was if she said, you know, once China does it, then maybe we'll consider it, because I think that's kind of where we should be in terms of international diplomacy, you know, because if China did say, all right, we're going to go net zero, I think most people in this country who currently think it's a waste of money and time might say, OK, well, if they've done it, then, and they've shown us the way, then let us copy them.
Well, this has to be a global effort if you're going to bother at all. I mean, let's be clear, a Chinese president doesn't even turn up at the COP26, COP27, COP28, whatever daft number we're now on. They don't even turn up. India and Indonesia and other countries that are on a growth pathway, they are chasing cheap energy because they know cheap energy finances growth. It gets more people out of poverty than anything else that's ever been created. So these growing countries are taking very little measure or notice of these things. And people are rightly saying, well, how come our 1% and these costs and deprivations we'll have to put ourselves through, lack of freedoms, is going to somehow save the planet, whilst all the while China is going gangbusters gangbusters for new coal, and as I said earlier, the incremental CO2 in just 1 year out of China is the entirety of the UK's output. And China in the last 8 years has outputted more CO2 than Britain has since the Industrial Revolution. That's putting it into some sort of facts that you can understand. So doing this unilaterally makes no sense. If you're going to do this, it needs to be global. And what worries me more than anything else is there is bound to be a eureka technology around the corner. It doesn't need us being nudged into technologies that don't work very well. Wind farms that are irregular, solar panels that obviously don't work at night, no thoughts at all about connecting up these new wind farms and solar farms, right. And no thought at all about where you're going to store the energy for when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. None of these things have been thought about. There may be a eureka technology. I certainly think small modular reactors are a better way forwards as a means of electricity generation. But we are rather kidding ourselves, because the entirety of energy use in the UK, only 20% is electricity. 80% is gas, petrol, diesel in your tanks, and that type of thing. And coal that you may be using for heating at home. So even if we manage to get all of our electricity some renewable source and the storage is sorted out, you've still got 80% to find as well. This is unbelievably expensive. The rest of the world isn't doing it. Perhaps some of that money that we're spending on these ambitions will be better off on adaptation, because, quite frankly, we're like King Canute, while the rest of the world is taking very little notice of any of this.
Yeah, exactly right. And just to push home for you, Craig, how influential this show is, I've already got this from Tony in Sutton in Ashfield, who says, great show, Craig Mackinlay should be PM as he talks common sense, and it's time the net zero rubbish was scrapped. There you go. So from net zero to hero, Craig, in 15 minutes. Brilliant. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Craig Mackinlay there on the College Green outside of the Houses of Parliament.